Breaking news, welcome. It's Erickson here out of the gate. John Thune has been named the Senate Majority Leader. He'll be the leader of the Republicans, replacing Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell, the longest-serving Republican leader in American history. McConnell has been leader since the early 2000s. John Thune of South Dakota will replace him. It was between him and John Cornyn in the end. Rick Scott did not have enough votes to make it to the second round of the vote. The ultimate vote wound up being 29-24. It's a closed-door vote. We don't know who voted for whom unless people were pretty vocal about it. Most of them weren't. But John Thune will be the Senate Republican leader. Breaking news happening now. He will work with Donald Trump and Mike Johnson to advance Trump's agenda. Other breaking news, Donald Trump meeting with Joe Biden right now and early this morning voiced support for Mike Johnson to be Speaker of the House. Lots happening. Y'all, I might as well start with this. I wasn't going to, but I might as well get it out of the way so we can move on to other things. The hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life was to look my wife in the eyes and tell her she was going to die. The week of Christmas in 2006, my wife was diagnosed with a very advanced, aggressive form of cancer, and she was given 6 months to live. The doctor said there was no point in treatment. There was nothing going to save her life. I had a 1-year-old at the time, and I had to be the one to tell my wife, had to wake her up from anesthesia, sit with her in the recovery room until she was coherent, and let her know there was nothing that could be done. They had gone in to do a biopsy of her lungs. They identified the problem, and they knew that there was nothing that could be done. And the worst part about it was she was recovering from anesthesia, so it all seemed kind of like a dream, and I had to do it all over again. Once she was more sufficiently recovered, I had to yet again tell my wife that you've got a death sentence. You've got 6 months to live. Now, thankfully, it was a misdiagnosis. What a wild way to start Christmas that year. It was rough. It was rough. Thankfully, it was a misdiagnosis. And, you know, had she not been misdiagnosed, it's just funny the way these things work. Had she not been misdiagnosed in 2006, when she was diagnosed with lung cancer in 2016, we would have never known she had lung cancer except for that misdiagnosis 10 years before. So the misdiagnosis actually wound up saving her life. But that night was rough. I don't wish that on any of you ever, to have to look your loved one in the eyes and tell them they're dying. Second hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life happened after this program yesterday. I was not expecting. None of us were expecting it. We had to put our dog down yesterday. Many of you, I know when I was in Tulsa, a lot of you were asking how Maggie's doing. Maggie got a lump on her throat a couple of weeks ago, and the doctor was a little bit fearful it could be a form of cancer, but steroids and antibiotics, the lump went away. And then the lump started coming back again once she got off the steroids, so the vet sent us to Blue Pearl, the animal vet specialists in Atlanta, and they were able to extract fluid and run a diagnosis on it. Well, in the meantime, that lump over the weekend got bigger and bigger, more rapidly, quicker and quicker and quicker, grew and grew and grew, till on Sunday, we got up at 7:15 in the morning and drove an hour and a half to the vet in Atlanta, and the thing ruptured while we were at the vet, and it just like chocolate milk was pouring out of her neck. It was gross. But they did surgery. They removed, she had an abscessed lymph node. They removed it. They cleaned everything, and she was just left with this gaping hole on the side of her neck and all bandaged up. And my wife was supposed to take her up to Atlanta this morning to get the oncology report, but they called yesterday afternoon, and it turns out she had all the cancers. She had the treatable lymphoma, and she had the untreatable lymphoma. In addition to a massive infection in her body, She couldn't have chemo because they had to resolve the infection. And the doctor, and look, I know this is oncologists, human or animal, are like, you can fight. And they were like, well, we can do like a whole bunch of rounds of chemo, and you're just going to buy her like maybe a year and a half of life, and she's going to be miserable the whole time. But I'm stunned by the number of people who go through that option because it's for them and not their animal. And we were like, wait, so we're going to give our dog chemotherapy for, 8 months to a year, and at most she's going to get a year and a half of life? It just, no, that made no sense to us. So we made the decision yesterday that there was no reason to wait. Maggie was miserable. She couldn't eat. She had this wound on the side of her neck. She couldn't lift her head off the pillow. And to put her through chemo, no. So we took our dog to the vet. And that was that. And we sat in the room the whole time and watched life fade away. It was unpleasant. So, thank you all. I put up a note on social media, got lots of prayers and well wishes. It was actually, it was definitely the second hardest thing after telling my wife she was going to die, to actually have to take our dog. And let's be real here, the dog was my wife's dog. Like my wife was a little concerned that my son wasn't super emotional about it. It's like, yeah, look, he loves the dog, but this is your dog. This is not his dog. You and the dog sleep in the bed together. You and the dog take naps together. You and the dog go everywhere together. This is your animal, not his animal. He's not as emotionally invested as you, and he's a boy. My daughter was more emotional. She cried. I tried very hard not to. Wanted to be the strong man of the family. It was a wreck. It was a wreck. And then to slowly see the color fade out of her tongue it was tough. We did not want to keep the ashes. We did do cremation. There's no reason to keep the ashes. I know people who do, and I just find it a little creepy. And my wife has always found it a little creepy as well. I'll keep my wife's ashes until I work up the nerve to get on a motorcycle with the lid off the urn and ride and let the wind take her. But nope, not the dog's ashes. So in any event, thank you again. I have been overwhelmed with so many text messages, and I can't reply to everyone. It's emotionally grueling. I think people understand that it is just emotionally just overwhelming to do and to deal with. And I appreciate everyone and all of your many condolences and kindnesses. And I'm too spent to do this. I've got to be out of town tomorrow too, which is I got to do a listener event in Las Vegas, and it's too late to cancel that. It's been on the books, and my wife was like, just go. You need a break. I haven't had a break. I've been dealing with sick family and sick dog. My wife mostly with a sick dog, and then me with my wife who's dealing with a sick dog, and the election and everything else. I'm ready for a break. I'm not going to be here on Friday, by the way. I'm decided I'm going to stay an extra little bit in Las Vegas and unwind. So in any event, let's move on to real stuff. I just might as well get that out of the way. Pete Hegseth, that's where I want to begin, really. He is an unconventional pick for Secretary of Defense. He's from Minnesota, ran for the Senate unsuccessfully, was endorsed back in the day by Bill Kristol, interestingly enough, who's now blasting the pick. It's Bill Kristol. What an odd guy. A lot of people in the media are scratching their heads over Pete Hegseth because they think, well, he's a Weekend Fox and Friends guy. That's why Trump picked him. And I got to tell you, there's a level of arrogant snideness in the responses of a lot of people over Pete Hegseth. John Noonan is a defense writer. He's writing over at National Review. He's a veteran of the Air Force. Pete is an unconventional pick. He spent his last few years as one of the co-hosts on Fox and Friends. As I speak, newsrooms across the country are preparing snide commentary that will highlight his time at the network rather than his time in uniform. That is a mistake. Pete is a graduate of Princeton and Harvard and a combat veteran. Despite his Ivy League pedigree, Pete saw the 9/11 attacks and responded by volunteering for the infantry. Anyone who knows him understands the guy has a deep and abiding love for America and her military, in particular the young men and women with steel in their hands and sand under their boots who put themselves in harm's way to defend the Constitution. The Secretary of Defense role is a political appointment, and it is political in nature. To be successful is to understand politics and all the strange little levers and pulleys and gears that make Washington spin. He understands politics. At 44, he will no doubt be accused of being too young for the role. Not true. Don Rumsfeld was 43 when he was appointed as Secretary of Defense for his first stint and was quite a good Secretary of Defense. One of our most effective service secretaries in history, John Lehman Jr., was 38 when Ronald Reagan named him Secretary of the Navy. He outfoxed the Pentagon bureaucracy who opposed him and was lauded for being the architect of the 600-ship Navy we have. There's rot in the Pentagon. It is deeply entrenched. It requires an unconventional pick, youthful energy, and a keen understanding of Congress and Washington in perilous times. Yes, I completely agree, by the way. I think Pete Hegseth is an out-of-the-box pick who will be good. This is Hegseth. He has something in common with Mike Walls and Marco Rubio. Listen to this clip. He was doing a podcast interview.
China's building an army specifically dedicated to defeating the United States of America. That is their strategic outset. Take hypersonic missiles. So if our whole power projection platform is aircraft carriers and the ability to project power that way strategically around the globe, and yeah, we have a nuclear triad and all of that, but a big part of it. And if 15 hypersonic missiles can take out our 10 aircraft carriers in the first 20 minutes of a conflict, what does that look like?
Yes, that's part of the problem here. We need more nuclear attack submarines and less aircraft carriers at this point. Why? Because our nuclear submarines are so quiet. One member of the military from one of foreign power, I think it was the British or the Australians, said that it is easier to find a tremor underground on Mars, to detect a tremor underground on Mars, than it is to find an American attack submarine under the ocean. That's how quiet our submarines are. Yeah, this was a British or Australian official talking about our military, and that was their quote, that it is easier to detect a tremor underground on Mars than it is to find an American nuclear attack submarine under the ocean. Aircraft carriers are very easy to find. We need the subs. We also need a shipbuilding plan, and we need someone unconventional, and that is Pete Hegseth. There is a report from Politico that our Pentagon officials are meeting behind the scenes to try to figure out how they can stall, slow, or disrupt Donald Trump's agenda. Part of the problem here is our bureaucracy believes the politicians work for them instead of the other way around. Our bureaucrats believe they know best, and the people of the United States just voted that they know best, and they will be heard. Having Pete Hegseth in as Secretary of Defense is deeply disruptive. It is a deeply unconventional pick. I assure you, China never saw it coming. And guess who Pete Hegseth realizes our big enemy is? China. So does Marco Rubio. So does Mike Walsh, the new incoming national security advisor. So does Elise Stefanik, the incoming UN ambassador. They all recognize that our threats are with China. We still have outstanding threats with Russia. He's an unconventional pick. He's a good pick. Stop listening to the left-wing bubble that says, oh my gosh, he's just a Fox News pretty face. That's why he was picked. No. He cares deeply, passionately about the military. He served after 9/11. He's been involved in a lot of military nonprofits. He knows this world. It's a good pick. Erickson here across the nation. The phone number is 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, I would be happy to have you. Can I y'all, it's just the way my head works. They're discouraging me from saying this, but I just got to say it. I'm in all of the misery of yesterday. I had to restrain myself from laughing a little bit. The doctor came in to put our dog down, shaves her back paw, and rubs it with alcohol before putting the needle in. And all I could think was, she's not going to get an infection. I'm telling you, No need for the alcohol. I mean, and I realized it was the doctor being respectful to our dog, but also I was like, it's not going to matter. Oh, it was sad. And then my wife was like, do we keep her blankets? Do we not keep her blankets? It's like, no, don't keep her blankets. And we got rid of the blankets. Then my wife dug the blankets out of the trash and washed them, and she wants to keep them. And I suspect we're going to be like discovering soon that we're getting a new dog. So I am deeply allergic to dogs. That was the other thing about yesterday going to the vet's office is my allergies just overwhelmed. So we had Maggie, who's a golden doodle, because I'm not allergic to them. And so in addition to like being upset already and being sad that our dog, my throat's closing up, not because I'm about to cry, but because I'm in a veterinary clinic filled with other dogs that I'm allergic to. What a mess. All right. Let's move on. The Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, looks set to retake his position. John Thune is going to be the Republican leader of the United States Senate. The implications of all of those, and I need to bring you back up to speed on what reconciliation means, because it in and of itself is going to be a very big deal moving forward. And there is one person in Washington, D.C., who has been thinking about reconciliation more than any other person. And I want to tell you who that person is. If you read my morning email, you already know. But first, I got to tell you about my bank, Old Glory Bank. I love them. Let me tell you about it from a business perspective, though. The number of businesses I've sent to Old Glory Bank, and they love them because they were a little skeptical not having a local branch manager where they are, because Old Glory Bank is headquartered out of Oklahoma, and they're mostly online. But the businesses now, I mentioned one yesterday, and another buddy of mine reached out and said, it's not just him, happened to me too. Old Glory Bank was so hands-on, they needed a loan. They moved their accounts to Old Glory Bank. Then they decided to get a loan. They were super hands-on, sent somebody to them to review the books, look at the business, get to know the management team, and it made it much easier for them to get help. And that person is going to be there for a while. If you've got a business and you're looking for a bank, oldglorybank.com. You can fill the form out online, Social Security number or EIN. I've got a personal savings and checking account with them. They do loans, mortgages, CDs, everything you need. oldglorybank.com, oldglorybank.com. Member FDIC, equal housing lender, terms and conditions apply. So, no, they don't have to confirm her, Pamela. And she and if Tulsi Gabbard is nominated for Director of National Intelligence, the two of them may actually have problems with Republican senators. Now, the default for Democrats and Republicans alike is give the president the cabinet he wants. And if you will recall, even in the first term, there were Democrats who voted for Donald Trump as cabinet picks. But although the Republican majority, of course, they had enough, they didn't have to worry about it until he had some replacements after the Democrats were in charge. But the general rule is that, you give the president his cabinet picks. Nome may have trouble because the Department of Homeland Security is a very weird amalgamation of departments put together after 9/11. And it's a very unwieldy group of agencies together. Now, the interesting thing about it is that you got Republicans behind the scenes advising Donald Trump that she's going to be in over her head. And we'll see if she's able to make it to the confirmation. When Tulsi Gabbard is a name being floated for Director of National Intelligence, I can tell you, some of the Republican senators I've talked to, they're going to have a 53-seat majority. She may not get 50 votes. You'll have to have 50 votes for confirmation plus one from J.D. Vance, and she may not get 50 votes, is what I'm being told, if she's the nominee for Director of National Intelligence. There are Republicans in the Senate who have very strong objections to Tulsi Gabbard for some of her foreign policy views on Russia and things like that. It's going to be a wild ride. Now, what I do know is out of the gate, Mike Johnson has the votes to be Speaker of the House again. If you read my morning piece, this is why it matters. Let me explain to you reconciliation. Republicans in Washington or whoever controls Congress can do something once a year, maybe twice a year under a precedent set by Chuck Schumer in certain conditions, but definitely once a year can do something called reconciliation. Back in the day, there was a man from West Virginia in the Senate. His name was Robert Byrd. Everything in West Virginia is named after him. He had been a leader of the KKK, became a Democratic member of the Senate, served for a very long time, and the Democrats loved their Klansman, Bob Byrd. Bob Byrd was a deficit hawk. He loved to spend money, loved to throw money around, but he was concerned about the national debt, and he was concerned that members of Congress could filibuster in the Senate issues about national debt and spending. The result was that Bob Byrd authored a rule into the United States Senate that 2/3 of the Senate agreed to, that once a year, after the House and Senate have agreed on a budget, the Senate can pass a measure called reconciliation that reconciles all federal spending to the parameters of the agreed upon budget. If there's no agreed upon budget, it's the last budget agreed on. And in this case, the last budget agreed on goes back to the Obama era. There was never a budget passed when Trump or Biden were president. They just kept working off the old budget from when Obama was president. So you can change and tweak spending, and the rule is so long as it doesn't increase the national debt, but actually has a meaningful impact on reducing the deficit, you can get it passed without a filibuster. It's just a majority vote. So the national debt is how much money the government owes collectively over time, and the deficit is that year's spending. The expenditures increased over income. That difference is the deficit. So if you're spending $300 trillion, you're spending $3 trillion. Your income is only $2 trillion. Your deficit is $1 trillion. 3 minus 2. Expenditures minus income equals whatever's left over. That negative there, that is your deficit for the year. And then that goes into the national debt. So Bob Byrd's rule is if you reduce the deficit, you can once a year pass a reconciliation package to reconcile all federal spending. Now, one of the caveats is that you're not allowed to add new policies. This tripped up the Democrats this past year. Remember, the Democrats wanted to bail out student loans and give amnesty to illegal immigrants in reconciliation, and also make abortion the law of the land. And the Democrats, or the parliamentarian in the Senate, said that would be new policy. You can't do it. And that's not under the reconciliation rule. The parliamentarian's decision is binding. The Senate cannot overrule the Senate can overrule the parliamentarian on anything the parliamentarian in the Senate decides, except reconciliation. If the parliamentarian rules what they want to do is new policy, they can't do it. That's what made everyone in the Senate be willing to do this Byrd rule back in the day, was the agreement that there would be no change in public policy. You could change the spending allocations. So, for example, how did the Democrats get the Green New Deal passed? Well, they argued to the parliamentarian, we're already subsidizing green energy programs, so this isn't new, it's just an expansion. And the parliamentarian went along with that. Based on that precedent now, the Republicans can say we've already block granted money to the states for education, we're just expanding it, and cut the Department of Education. All of this goes back to the Speaker of the House. In June of 2024, Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, convened a series of meetings with members of the Senate to discuss plans for the 2025 reconciliation package. And you know the response from the Senate Republicans? They laughed him out of the building. The Senate Republicans thought it was laughable to even consider reconciliation because they didn't know if they were going to have a majority of the House, let alone the Senate. Mike Johnson said he was convinced they were going to have the House, the Senate, and the White House, and they needed to start planning reconciliation. And the Senate didn't do it. But you know who did? Mike Johnson. Mike Johnson continued having the meetings, continued making them come to the meetings, used his clout as Speaker of the House to force the Senate Republicans to start coming up with a framework for reconciliation. He used his clout as Speaker of the House to force House Republicans to come up with a plan for reconciliation. So Mike Johnson, since June, has been plotting how to implement Donald Trump's agenda through reconciliation, and he's the guy with the plan. He's the guy with the book. John Thune, the new Senate Republican leader, was one of the Republicans in the Senate who allegedly questioned why they were even having the conversations at the time. But Thune, you should know, had the backing of some of the prominent conservatives in the in the Republican conference. Here's what I'm told. Most of the Republican members of the Senate did not want Rick Scott because they blamed Rick Scott for the Senate in 2022. They said Rick Scott would not stand up to Donald Trump and allowed Donald Trump to pick candidates without himself intervening to dissuade Donald Trump from people like Dr. Oz and Herschel Walker and even Kerry Lake. And because of that, the Senate Republicans should have been able to pick up the Senate, but because of bad candidates, they lost it, and they blame Rick Scott for not intervening. They also really hated the all of the online right, we're going to get into this in a little while, rallying for Rick Scott because they viewed it as a paid operation, paid operatives on social media trying to rally the right in a herd to Rick Scott. You had people like Dana Lash, a radio show host, friend of mine, who was vehement that Rick Scott's bad on guns, bad on the Second Amendment. You can't have Rick Scott. I know and like Rick Scott. I'd be perfectly fine with him, but I knew going into this that me being vocal for Rick Scott was going to hurt him more than help him. And sure enough, some of the Senate Republicans in the end said also this grassroots agitation for Rick Scott is what finally said enough is enough, that he didn't stand up in 22 to Trump and then had the Trump horde of online right fans going for him. That was enough. So it came down to Cornyn and Thune. Conservatives in the Senate prefer John Thune to John Cornyn for this reason. I prefer John Thune to John Cornyn for this reason. I know a lot of people who have worked for John Cornyn. A lot of people who do not like John Cornyn, who worked for John Cornyn, and their reason is because they say John Cornyn in public was very, very helpful to conservatives and in private would sabotage the efforts. That's not me. I don't know John Cornyn. I don't know John Thune. I know and like Rick Scott. I think Rick Scott would have been great. Rick Scott never in private was unwilling to fight for conservatives. But his Senate Republican friends were the ones who felt like he betrayed them in 22, and they nursed a grudge against him. But John Cornyn, I know too many conservatives said that in public he was willing to do all the right things, and in private sabotage conservatives. And John Thune, for all of his faults, never actively tried to sabotage conservatives in private. And so a number of the Republican senators went with Thune. I'm told Ted Cruz is one of the ones who went with John Thune over John Cornyn, who is his colleague from Texas, if that tells you something. The big guy, though, that we needed to have his back is Mike Johnson. Donald Trump this morning had a meeting with the House Republicans and told them to stand with Mike Johnson, that he wanted Mike Johnson to be Speaker. He privately apparently told Marjorie Taylor Greene to lay off Mike Johnson and not try to undermine him. Here's the other big thing of why we want Mike Johnson is because the House convenes on January 3rd for the first time. January 6th, they'll make Kamala Harris certify the election results. There's not enough time to have a fight over the Speaker of the House, given what's happening. You could have the fight over Kevin McCarthy in 2022 because there was no certification of a presidential ballot. There is now. Time's of the essence. So stick with Mike Johnson. And it looks like they're going to, thankfully, because, Johnson as well, he's the very first social and fiscal conservative to be Speaker of the House. That matters, too. Don't underestimate that fact. Mike Johnson is the very first Speaker of the House to philosophically and institutionally be firmly socially conservative, firmly pro-life, and a firm fiscal conservative. We've never had that before. So good for Mike Johnson. Now, let me tell you about Hillsdale College, because Hillsdale College would love to have a relationship with you. If you go to erickforhillsdale.com, E-R-I-C-K, erickforhillsdale.com, you can sign up with Hillsdale College. You can start getting Imprimis for free. You can learn about common sense ways the country was founded from Dr. Larry Arnn and his lecture series on the Constitution that you can get for free. You get their podcast network for free, and you can support Hillsdale College's institutional mission to advance education without indoctrination and instill a love of America. It's not indoctrination to instill a love of America. It's just the facts. We're such a great country, and you got all these projects out there like the 1619 Project trying to poison the well for America. Hillsdale College is trying to tell the truth about America and why we're such a great country. erickforhillsdale.com. Get Imprimis. It's show prep for your mind. I've been getting it for free since I was in law school. erickforhillsdale.com, E-R-I-C-K, erickforhillsdale.com. Sign up with Hillsdale College today. Build your relationship with them. Get Imprimis for free, the podcast for free, the lecture series on the Constitution and citizenship from Victor Davis Hanson for free, and get their pocket Constitution for free. erickforhillsdale.com. Hello there. Welcome. It is Erick Erickson here across the United States of America, and boy, am I glad to have you. When we come back at the top of the hour, my buddy Jim actually just texted me, and he says, at what point will we conservatives stop listening to and getting our dander up over what the mainstream media says? We all know they're bought and paid for by the Democrats, as well as much of the polling. I'm no prophet nor the son of one, but I've been saying for months that the election shouldn't be close, and it wasn't. But every news program, including Fox, too close to call within the margin of error. Daddy's coming home. I just texted you back, said the top of the hour. I really want you to be here at the top of the hour because I got to make some very specific points that otherwise aren't going to get said. First, this hour of the program brought to you by First Liberty Building a Loan. Wherever you are in the United States of America, First Liberty Building a Loan can help your business grow. If you're buying a building, you're building a building, you're growing, let First Liberty help your business grow. Reach out to them, firstlibertyga.com. I got to play you this small clip from Harry Hinton on CNN.
Exactly right. I mean, Donald Trump, you remember back in 2017, the liberal cities were the resistance, the core of the resistance. What happened in 2024? You think of a major city in the United States, Donald Trump put up the best Republican performance for a Republican nominee for president in at least 20 years, if not the entire 21st century. We're talking about Chicago, Los Angeles, New York City, San Francisco. Across the map, Donald Trump put up historically strong numbers for Republican candidate, for president, in places that, truthfully, if you had asked me 8 years ago, I would have never thought possible.
Exactly. And, why did he do it? He didn't do it because of rich white people. He did it because of working class, white, black, and Hispanic people. I'm sorry, but I can't bring myself to say brown-skinned people. We have black and white in this country. Now they want to capitalize black and they want to capitalize white when they refer to culture. I don't do that. And then they want to refer to Hispanic people as brown-skinned people. But you're not allowed to refer to American Indians as red-skinned people. God forbid you do that. But we can call brown-skinned people. The whole thing is perverse. The identity politics of the left is perverse. By the way, interestingly enough, do you know what non-white demographic, actually what racial ethnic demographic voted for Donald Trump in the biggest numbers? I had no idea. It's in the exit polling. What demographic of people overwhelmingly voted for? Over 85% of a single demographic voted for Donald Trump. Any idea? It wasn't white people, wasn't black people, wasn't Asian people, wasn't Hispanic people. It was American Indians. American Indians. And by the way, did you know that American Indians prefer the term American Indian to Native American? Turns out they do. And American Indians overwhelmingly voted for Donald Trump. Now, you may ask how, but I would never make a joke like that. American Indians, though, they love them some Donald Trump. Now can we pass the law to repeal reservation status for Oklahoma, please? You know, half that state is also a reservation. It has screwed up legislating and taxation in Oklahoma. It's time to get rid of half of Oklahoma being an Indian reservation, because none of them actually live on a reservation. They live in Tulsa and the like. It's time to fix that issue. Apparently, American Indians also support doing that. When we come back, though, the myopia of the media, I need you to listen to this. Conversationalists, welcome. It's Erick Erickson here across the fruited plain. The phone number is 877-973-7425. I am absolutely delighted to have you with me. If you would please text ARMY to 33777. Would love to have you. So, you know, we were in Tulsa last week. We're going to Las Vegas tomorrow, and we'll be in Jacksonville in December for a charity event. And as we go around the nation, love to be able to ping you and say, hey, we're going to be in this area, come hang out with us, grab a drink, watch the show, however we structure it in the conferences as well. Doing more and more in the field, going to the audience. By the way, for you program directors listening, would love to work with you. I know WEB up in Southern Pines, North Carolina, we're going to go up there next year. Y'all don't have to cover. I'll do all the travel costs to get to you. I know what your economics are for your radio stations right now. Don't want you to have to cover my cost of coming. I'm happy to come hang out with the listeners in your area, and we'll be working on that next year. I'd love to hit multiple markets in addition to doing the gathering next year. So I cover my airfare, rental car, hotel, and then the station just find us a venue, and we're happy to come. Now, for the rest of you, 877-973-7425. If you want to be on the program, if you're just tuning in, John Thune is going to be the Senate Republican leader. Mike Johnson will again be Speaker of the House. Donald Trump has been meeting with Joe Biden. I want to reemphasize something I talked about yesterday in a little bit of a different way. And I want to begin by playing a clip from Carl Bernstein of Woodward and Bernstein fame. He was on CNN. Listen to this conversation.
Look at the three beneficiaries of this election as reflected in these appointments in part, and that is Putin, Netanyahu, and the third would really be
Xi Jinping in China.
Pardon me?
China.
Yeah, well, the Chinese. But the real thing is that these appointments are indicative of a new American position in the world, that we no longer are. NATO is no longer the significant leader in the world, that we're looking at a situation in Ukraine that has fallen to the disadvantage of Ukraine as a result of this election, what Donald Trump has said.
That's Carl Bernstein, and CNN labels him a political analyst. Ron Brownstein is also a CNN political analyst. Ron Brownstein is a very nice man. Ron Brownstein despises Donald Trump and has regularly, over the last year, circulated data suggesting that the demographic shift towards Donald Trump wasn't true, that Hispanic voters wouldn't go towards him and stuff. Ron Brownstein has long time believed demography is destiny and the days of the Republican Party would go away. You have Jeffrey Toobin on CNN back. You have Brian Stelter on CNN, who has really sung the praises regularly of MSNBC in ways that I just think reflect negatively on someone who's supposed to be objective about the press. You've got, who else do you have? So many voices at CNN, a network that I dearly love and spent 3 years at and still have a great number of friends with. But most of the outside voices, for a long time, they had John Haywood on there, or Harwood. He used to be at CNBC. John Harwood was at CNBC as a political analyst. He wrote at the New York Times. He then went to CNN, where he was a political analyst for CNN, and he was very clearly on the left. And now that he's not at CNN and is on Twitter, he is explicitly a partisan progressive. And these are the voices that CNN relied on to help shape the news at CNN. But it's not just CNN. It's not just CNN. MSNBC, of course, is notorious. But also, I think Fox News, to a degree, falls into the trap. But Fox less than the others, in large part because It has so many people on the right. Here's the point. If you watched CNN's coverage of Donald Trump's debate remarks about they're eating the dogs, they're eating the pets, very funny lines, and you watched the ongoing coverage of Springfield, Ohio on CNN, you would have been convinced Donald Trump was going to lose Springfield, Ohio for the third time. He lost it to Hillary Clinton. He lost it to Joe Biden. But Donald Trump actually, for the very first time, won Springfield, Ohio. Now, he's won Clark County, where Springfield, Ohio exists, but he's never won the city of Springfield, Ohio, but he did. Had you watched the coverage, and again, I'm ignoring MSNBC because we all know the biases there. CNN is the network that presents itself as kind of middle of the lane, just the news, and yet the coverage at CNN was ruthlessly antagonistic to Donald Trump and, in fact, chose voices to interview in Springfield, Ohio, who downplayed the problems of the Haitian immigrants in Springfield, Ohio, and left the viewers of CNN with an impression that the claims that Donald Trump and the right were making were all off the wall. Except, if you listen to this program, I happen to be the number one talk show with men in Springfield, Ohio right now. I happen to know my ratings there. And I happen to know we get a ton of phone calls from people from the Springfield, Ohio area. And while all of them said, actually, they're not eating the pets, but there are huge problems, and here they are. CNN did not show their viewers those stories, did not tell those viewers those stories, and to the extent they did, they excused them away using people who are from the Democratic side or who hate Donald Trump. And yet, we had tons of phone calls from people who don't like Donald Trump. We're like, these are huge problems. Take Tony Hinchcliffe in Puerto Rico. I mentioned yesterday, this is one of the ones I got wrong. It was based on Republican pollsters showing a move away from Trump. And in fact, he did see a decline in Puerto Rican support after it, but it wasn't enough. However, if you watch CNN, again, not doing MSNBC because we know where MSNBC is, but on CNN, if you watch CNN, it was a huge story. In fact, on CNN, they gave more coverage to Tony Hinchcliffe's remarks, the remarks not a man of the President of the United States. They gave more coverage to Tony Hinchcliffe's remarks at Trump's Madison Square Garden rally than they did to Joe Biden calling Trump supporters garbage. And in fact, there were voices at CNN who tried to excuse Joe Biden for a revision to the transcript over the objections of the transcriber, saying, well, he didn't really mean it. They tried to excuse him away in a way no one at CNN ever does Donald Trump. Take Seth Moulton and CBS News. Seth Moulton is the Democratic congressman who, after the election, said, we've got to stop supporting men beating girls sports. CBS News referred to Seth Moulton's comments as controversial. According to the exit polling for this very election, between 75 and 80% of Americans agree with Seth Moulton. The only people who found Seth Moulton's views controversial are the people in the newsrooms of America and progressives, the same people. No one in America considers that view controversial except progressives in newsrooms. Take abortion. If you watched, again, forget about MSNBC. We know their problems. At CNN, abortion dominated conversations this year. There's a program called LexisNexis. LexisNexis is a website. Used to use it for legal research. LexisNexis is the internet before the internet was. LexisNexis, you can go all the way back to the 1930s and 40s and find news articles, the transcripts of news articles. You can go in and find the transcripts of news shows. It's a very expensive paid service. If you go into LexisNexis and you pull up CNN and transcripts of CNN, abortion was a dominant conversation at that network this past year before the election. It was going to matter. Abortion was going to be big. Look at 2022. It was going to be big again. And by the way, it was contributing to the divide among women. Massive, massive gender gap. Turns out that wasn't true. Abortion was not even in the top 4 or 5 issues. And not only that, abortion was not the dominant issue for women. And in fact, married women broke for Donald Trump. But you wouldn't have learned that. If you were a viewer of CNN, you wouldn't have gotten that because the political analysts like Ron Brownstein, like Carl Bernstein, like all the others were convinced this was big. This was a big issue, and they got it wrong. Now let's take the Wall Street Journal today. There's a big story that Donald Trump wants to set up a commission of military veterans to review the generals, to boot generals that they don't think are a good fit for the Trump administration. The Washington Post says this risks politicizing the military. I'm sorry, but have you not been paying attention to Joe Biden's military? Where Lloyd Austin, the Secretary of Defense, disappeared for some period of time. They've had multiple people with questionable ties to Iran and the Pentagon. The Pentagon has pursued DEI, something that people in media don't think is a big deal, and yet they have. They've elevated political correctness in parts of the military. They've wanted to put transgender soldiers on the front lines, which actually is impossible because of the medications that trans soldiers have to go through, so they can't actually be on the front lines. No one in the media questioned that. Now the Wall Street Journal is saying this risks politicizing the military. I will tell you who's politicized the military. The Biden administration. The Biden administration. And by the way, the Secretary of Defense and all of these people are political appointees. Even the generals at the top are appointed by politicians and do serve a political purpose. And Joe Biden used a political frame to pick his general. But you wouldn't know that from the Wall Street Journal story. Likewise, CNN, CBS, even Fox News have talked about the hand-wringing in Washington, D.C., about the Justice Department being an arm of the president instead of independent. It is not independent. It never has been independent. It has always been an arm of the presidency. Why? Because the executive power of the United States government is vested in a single president of the United States who picks the department heads of the executive branch over which he presides. It is a left-wing fiction that goes back to Carl Bernstein and Bob Woodward and Watergate that presumes the Justice Department is independent of the president. It's not true, but it's regurgitated by the likes of Jeffrey Toobin. It's regurgitated by the likes of Carl Bernstein. All these voices on CNN. And so the point is that when you watch CNN, a network that tries to be middle of the road, when you read USA Today, a newspaper that tries to capture all voices, they're not capturing all voices. They're capturing the Democrat-dominant voices, and they're shaping the news to those people. And they have, as a result, missed the Puerto Rican vote story. They have missed the Springfield, Ohio story. They have missed the insignificance of abortion in the electorate. They have missed the women's vote was not as wide as they expected it to be. They have missed what's happened at the Pentagon. They missed, remember, Scott Jennings on CNN the other night, Abby Phillips, who had been a Washington Post reporter, was dumbfounded when Scott Jennings pointed out that a majority of Americans support mass deportation. It's in the data. It's in the polling data. It's in the exit polling. An overwhelming majority of Americans don't just support deportation, but mass deportation. And Abby Phillips, the anchor, and all the other guests were gobsmacked. Or the Ferguson effect, also on that program, when what's his name from the Daily Wire raised it. And Abby Phillips actually had written about it at the Washington Post and had no idea of what he was talking about when he said the Ferguson effect, that police officers stopped policing after Ferguson and after George Floyd. It's a documented effect, although some people dispute it, but it's documented. It has a name, and everyone around that table was gobsmacked surprised and thought he was making it up. These networks are in a bubble. They are in a bubble where they're not conveying reality. They're conveying Democratic talking points as reality. And if they want to save themselves, and I'm not sure they do, they need to not bring in Republicans to counter the Democrats. They need to bring in right-of-center political analysts, right-of-center editors, right-of-center reporters who actually aren't going to listen to the Democrats, because that's the problem. I can put my finger on it, and I know it's true, by all of the number of stories just this year. CNN, again, forget MSNBC and its problems. CNN, the number of stories CNN got wrong because the objective political analysts they rely on are of the Democratic worldview. And they've missed these stories. They've taken Democratic talking points as truth and questioned the Republicans. And the result is they have so badly misled their audience is tuning out. And it's the same at USA Today and the Washington Post and the New York Times, of course MSNBC, and so many other outlets. They've treated what the Democrats tell them as true and what the Republicans tell them must be questioned. That shapes their coverage in a way that misrepresents society. Let me just end here. Go back to the Springfield, Ohio story. Donald Trump didn't just win Clark County. He won a city that he's lost twice after raising the issue of the Haitians in a way that on CNN the coverage was he was a racist, and the coverage was it wasn't a problem, and yet it's such a problem that the people of Springfield, Ohio, who do not like Donald Trump, voted for Donald Trump to solve a problem CNN said did not exist. If you text Erick, E-R-I-C-K, to 33777, you can get the show notes, the live stream, the podcast, and everything else. If you're on the phones, bear with me. This is a short segment. I do want you to know, regarding the media, the publisher of the Los Angeles Times has announced he's firing the entire editorial board. They're going to be replaced. He says they were out of touch with the voters. Now, let me give you some examples from Bill Malugin at Fox News. In the Los Angeles Times editorial pages, they argued for publicly mocking the deaths of people who didn't get the COVID vaccine. They argued that Larry Elder is the blackface of white supremacy. And they regularly endorsed George Gascon, the Los Angeles County District Attorney, who lost by 20 points his reelection bid. They endorsed him. The Los Angeles Times editorial board has been completely out of touch with reality for quite some time, and the publisher has decided as a result, game over, done. He's tired of dealing with them. They were upset over his refusal for them to endorse Kamala Harris. They wanted to endorse her. He refused, said no more presidential endorsements. They got mad at him. A couple of them quit. Same with the Washington Post. How much more many clues do members of the media need? They need an intervention. They're completely out to lunch. Now, I want you to, intervene in your life. If you want to be a better conservative, you can go to americansforprosperity.org/volunteer and sign up with them today. Americans for Prosperity is the largest and leading grassroots organization in the country, and they happen to be conservatives. They train activists to be door knockers, to educate neighbors on key issues. They train you how to be an effective spokesperson for common sense conservative reform. They teach you how to go to your local government, your school board, or your state government and advocate for school choice, for tax reform, for small businesses, and for families. And they involve you in a network of great fellow-minded conservative activists, so you know you're not alone out there. If you want to join them, they've got chapters in just about every single state. You go to americansforprosperity.org/volunteer. americansforprosperity.org/volunteer. Sign up with AFP. I'm actually doing an event for Americans for Prosperity in Salt Lake City the weekend of December 7th. I'm going to fly out there for them. They're a great group. I love them. You will too. americansforprosperity.org/volunteer. Sign up with them today. So is there, okay, there's not going to be the rise of a third party. Anything that happens is going to be internal reform, and here's why. The only thing that Republicans and Democrats hate more than each other is a third party. And so the ballot access laws in all of the states disadvantage a third party. There are some exceptions. Green parties, for example, have ballot access in some states, and libertarians have ballot access in almost all 50 states, but libertarians are too busy getting high to effectively run a major party campaign, so no one ever worries about them. And the Green Party is too fringe for anyone to really worry about. So the Democrats are going to have to do this internally. Now, I will tell you that financially, the Democratic Party is not in good shape. There's a story out today that the Democratic Party is broke. Here's the problem for Democrats. Well, actually, you know what? Let me step back. Let me step back and say this. When you look at the results of the election, Republicans should tread very carefully on the idea that they have a mandate for wholesale reform. Here's why. When Joe Biden won the presidency and the Democrats won in 2022, the Democrats took those wins as a complete rejection of Trump and MAGA and believed they had the power to fundamentally transform the role of government in people's lives. And that's actually a quote. Joe Biden brought a bunch of historians in who convinced him that his win meant that he could fundamentally transform the role of government in people's lives. And the pendulum has swung dramatically in the opposite direction. Trump's win was about 1.5 million votes, more than Harris. A lot of people stayed home. A lot of Biden voters became Trump voters. I mean, at the end of the day, just so you understand now, only about 2 million people less voted in 2024 compared to 2020. When all the votes have been counted now, and in California, they're still counting votes, and they will be till Friday, but there have only about 2 million fewer people voted this time than last time. And Trump won by about 1.5 million votes. He may wind up losing the popular vote, although I'm kind of thinking he's going to keep the popular vote at this point. Republican, their win in the House, very narrow. They're going to have maybe 9-10 seat majority, pretty much like it is right now. The Senate's a great one. The Senate, they're going to have 53 seat majority. But that's not an overwhelming mandate to fundamentally change government. It is a mandate for competent government. And if you show the people competence, then you might actually get the mandate for fundamental change. But you got to show them competence first. So the Republicans need to be very careful to understand and interpret their win with humility. Because if they don't, the voters could be so aggravated that without the Democrats fixing anything, they just give the government back to the Democrats and say, okay, now maybe y'all will learn your lesson. Okay, now maybe y'all will learn your lesson. Okay, now maybe, and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. The Democrats, however, have real fundamental problems. And that is that the progressive base of the Democratic Party is deeply out of touch with where the American people are. And they are working very hard to silence everybody else. And because they're working to silence everybody else, they're going to have a hard time figuring out how to proceed. They're going to have a hard time figuring out how to convince Americans they're not completely out to lunch. And that's going to be difficult, I suspect, for the Democrats to navigate, in large part because the donors of the Democratic Party are some of the most out to lunch people. You know, I said the other day, George and Alex Soros deserve a good bit of credit for Donald Trump's election because Alex Soros in particular, more so than his father, is a very, very diehard progressive activist and funder. And so Alex Soros has funded a bunch of progressive Democrats in areas of the country where they weren't good fits. And you had progressive DAs like George Gascon in Los Angeles County get swept out. The district attorney in Athens, Clark County, Georgia, got swept out by an independent. Around the country in San Francisco, the voters there voted to recall not only their Democratic district attorney, but now they've booted London Breed, their progressive mayor. In fact, the new mayor of San Francisco is an heir to the Levi's jeans family fortune. Listen to this guy on CNN. He's a progressive Democrat. Listen to this guy.
I think people want results, and they were not seeing that. Aaron, there's nothing progressive to have 806 people die of drug overdose in our city last year. Property crime is rampant. Our small businesses are struggling each and every day. They want a mayor that is focused on delivering results. That's the mandate I was voted in with, and that's what I'm going to do. I don't believe that that is anything more than those are progressive values. And so I understand I'm talking to a national audience here. This is not liberal, progressive, conservative. People want to feel safe walking down the street. We had so many instances of anti-Asian hate on our streets. Yeah. Those are things that we need to get addressed.
Look, that's a progressive Democrat. Daniel Lurie is going to be the mayor of San Francisco. He's a progressive, but he's also one who believes you got to be tough on crime. And that, my friends, becomes the problem. the Democrats, their donor class is out of touch with America, and their loudest voices are out of touch. And they're going to have to figure out how to fix that problem in order to make real adjustments in how they advance the Democratic Party. Now, the phone number is 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, I'm happy to help you. Happy to have you. But Charlie's getting a friend of mine on the phone because we do this every year at this time. We are a couple of weeks away now from Thanksgiving. And I am more and more mindful this year, given the state of the economy and the costs of things, that it's very expensive to live life right now. The average American household right now, one of the reasons the election results went the way they were is because the average American household spends close to $1,200 more a year than they used to. Hang on. Call us at 973 4. We're having phone issues. Okay. Charlie, that's okay. David's going to call in on the regular phone line. So here he comes. Yeah, my buddy David Huey runs a nonprofit called Hungry for a Day. And essentially the role of Hungry for a Day is they take care of people who are in need right now. Okay, I'm sorry. David was supposed to call it. Charlie, will you call David? I'm trying to text him and do a national radio show at the same time and just get him to call in right now. We can go on and do this. Sorry, folks. Not my fault. In any event, Hungry for a Day raises money around the country for people to pay for their Thanksgiving dinners because it's gotten expensive. Turkeys are expensive now. And, well, all right, never mind. We'll wait till the top of the hour. My friend David Huey, I want him to come on. This is a heck of a way to do it now. It's because it's time to get off the election and start thinking about other people at this point. And Hungry for a Day raises money for paying for people. And this is the reason I like Hungry for a Day, is because they actually buy the food. So they're going to buy the turkey, buy the bread, buy the sweet potatoes, and buy all that. And just need a like $20 donation to feed a family of 4. So at the top of the hour, we will get David Huey on to talk about it. Since nothing's going right today, why should this? But let me move on here then with all the other stuff I wanted to talk about. You know what? Actually, since I'm so thrown off here, Kobe, let's just go into commercial break because all this whole thing got messed up. And so let's just start over on the other side of the break where I'll have time to talk about other stuff. So let me tell you about Vision Computer. If you need a computer for Christmas, by the way, Christmas is coming up. You're thinking about getting your kids a computer. Vision Computer is a great way to give them a computer. Go to visioncomputers.com. Today, they can build you a PC. You can also call them at 404 Compute. And listen, Mom and Dad, if you don't want to be your kid's tech support, you build the computer with Vision Computers, and they can actually be your tech support. So your kids, I do this in my house. My kid has the phone number. If there's ever a question about his computer, he doesn't ask me. He calls Vision. They answer the phone quickly. They give him his answer, and they speak to him at his level so he can take care of his computer without me having to do it. It's a great reason to use Vision. But let's say you've got a company, they can do it for you as well. If you've got a computer already, they can even do it for just $179 a year, $179 a year per computer. You get the phone number and you call them and they take care of everything. 404 Compute or visioncomputers.com. If you call them at 404 Compute and tell them I sent you, you're going to save even more money. 404 Compute or visioncomputers.com. Well, here's your quote of the day. This is from Pete Hegseth, the nominee for Secretary of Defense. And I quote, "First of all, you've got to fire the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Any general that was involved, any general, admiral, whatever, that was involved in any of the DEI woke poop has to go." The dumbest phrase on planet Earth in the military is, "Our diversity is our strength." That's Pete Hegseth, the nominee for Secretary of Defense, wanting to eradicate DEI from the military. That's one of his top goals, and also beating China. Here's my concern. I was actually talking to a high-ranking member of the Senate, been there for a while, deeply involved in intelligence, and he said, we are not keeping pace to be able to take on China. To build missiles in this country is there are all sorts of problems with not just the procurement and supply chain, but the bureaucracy for approval. It takes too long to build a ship. It's almost impossible to build a ship. It's too costly to build a ship. It's too costly to repair a ship right now. And a lot of that has to do with regulation, and in particular, this government having prioritized environmental regulation over everything else. Take, for example, Guam. Did you know the Biden administration has decided to end strategic missile defense on the island of Guam? Here's what we know. This is not in dispute. Democrats and Republicans alike believe this, that should China launch a Eastern Pacific or Western Pacific war as they make incursions into Taiwan, one of the goals of China would be to bog us down with Guam and the Philippines. And in fact, given so much of our military capacity to help Taiwan is located in Guam, the American military and outside experts, and even the Chinese experts, agree Guam is going to be targeted when they invade Taiwan. The American military, going back to the Obama administration, has decided it needed to develop a strategic missile defense system for Guam, very similar to Israel's Iron Dome system. But in the last month, the Biden administration decided that there were too many endangered species and societal and environmental impact to be able to deploy a missile defense system to Guam. That's right. They prioritized the environment over saving the lives of our soldiers, sailors, and airmen stationed in Guam. And space cadets, I guess. That's wild to me. That's actually really wild to me that they would do it. I'm not surprised, but it is still kind of wild. It's remarkable to me that this is where we are. They prioritize these sorts of things over actual safety in combat. And this is something that Pete Hegseth has been sounding the alarm on for some time, that our national security should trump environmental concerns. And the left is starting to freak out now that they're actually diving into his body of research. By the way, you should also know a CIA official has been charged with espionage over leaking the Israeli satellite plans. Remember that someone within the U.S. government leaked the Israeli prep to the media, what they were doing to prepare their strikes on Iran? Turns out Asif Rahman, a CIA official working in Cambodia with top secret security clearance, leaked the highly classified documents about Iran's strike on Iran. Rahman accessed the information and using his credentials with the CIA and undermined Israel's response to Iran. Asif William Rahman, CIA official. John Ratcliffe has been named the director of the CIA for Donald Trump. He was the director of national intelligence. He has a mission to clean up the CIA. He's going to have his hands full. Lee Zeldin at the EPA is going to have his hands full. These people are going to actively undermine Trump's appointees. We know the Pentagon has already been strategizing how to undermine Trump. They did not see Pete Hegseth coming. If anything, that's one of the great things about having Hegseth as Secretary of Defense is nobody saw it coming. He's such a wild card. The people who know him think he's entirely competent to be able to handle this. Listen, let me just put it to you this way. If Pete Hegseth can navigate the politics of Fox News, he can navigate the Pentagon bureaucracy. That's all I'm going to say. If Pete Hegseth can navigate the politics and the corridors of Fox News, Pete Hegseth can navigate the politics of the Pentagon. In fact, it might be easier at the Pentagon than at Fox News. Kristi Noem remains the weak link. She's going to be terrible at Homeland Security. Everybody knows it. A lot of Trump friends of mine are just gobsmacked. I know one of them said he's been texting Trump trying to convince him that this is a mistake, and Trump's position is basically, let's see if she can make it through the confirmation process. That suggests to me that there are going to be people who set Kristi Noem up to fail her confirmation process. We'll see if that works out or not. Okay, we're going to reset here when we come back. I want you to, wherever you are, whether you're in California or Connecticut, understand what Hungry for a Day is. It's a great way for you to get involved in helping other people for Thanksgiving. It's coming up wild to me. This year is just coming to an end. Now that the election is over, it seemed like it took forever to get to the election, and now suddenly we're almost to Thanksgiving, and then we'll be to Christmas and the New Year. Finally, I'll get to have some sleep. What a wild season it is. But if you want an easy way to help a lot of people for the holidays, come back, listen to my conversation with my buddy David Huey as we talk about what you can do to feed people nationwide. We'll make it very easy for you when we come back right here on the Erick Erickson Show, 877-973-7425.